I've seen a big difference from the time I have started doing this in terms of my mental clarity, in terms of, my productivity.
ChatGPT itself is scratching the surface. There's so much that can be done, but it can only be explained visually and with use cases.
So Antler is really 0 to 1 in the sense of backing founders and not ideas.
Hey, this is Tim. I'm here with Nilesh Ghai today, who's the co-founder and CEO of Levitate. And Levitate is a AI solution for HR teams based out of Singapore and operating in Southeast Asia. Nilesh, welcome on the podcast.
Hey, thanks a lot, Tim. Nice to meet you and happy to be here.
Great. Yeah, I'm super glad to have you on the podcast. I've been following you on LinkedIn for quite a while now. I watched some of your past webinars, and you're a guy who knows a bit about LLMs. So I'm super excited to get into the meat of AI subject with you. I love talking to subject matter experts, and AI is something that I'm personally interested in. So it'll be great to chit chat about it with you as well. I introduced you obviously, but would you mind giving our audience a bit more broader introduction as well?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Nilesh, and I'm based out of Singapore, as Tim said. And I recently co-founded Levitate. Levitate is a AI based co-pilot for HR teams, basically helping them in different areas. Retention, AI, and more specifically generative AI to help build some of the functionalities of our platform. So yeah, that's about me. I've been in Singapore. I was in Manila for about 4 years. So been in Southeast Asia for about 8-9 years now.
Awesome. Seems like we have a lot in common. I was reviewing your LinkedIn profile, and well, first of all, we're set. At Tendope, I was selling to HR teams, and so are you. And it seems like you've been
Yeah.
doing it for a while. And I was focusing on the Philippines, so I'm sure you know a lot of the stuff we'll be talking about today. We can exchange, what went well, what went wrong, and maybe hopefully help a few people through that. I see here that you're
Sure.
also you went through the Antler program. Is that right? Is that with
Oh,
Levitate?
yes, yes. Levitate was born out of the Antler program. So we literally, me and my co-founder, we met at the Antler program, and obviously we went through a few ideas before, working on this specific idea. And eventually, we pitched to the Antler investment committee and got our pre-seed funding, and we've started building the product now. So yeah, that's been the journey with respect to Antler and what we did at Antler.
That's awesome. I'd love to learn more about Antler because I've spoken to several founders, not on the podcast, but separately through my consulting firm,
Mhm.
about the Antler program and the pros and cons versus another accelerator like Iterative, for example. I'd love to
Right.
get the insights of someone who actually went through it on the podcast to kind of
Sure.
give more information to people who might be considering going through it.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point, and maybe I'll share my experience. So and you spoke about iterative, and you did speak about Antler. So in fact, when I was considering, getting into entrepreneurship, and I kind of looked at both these options, which is iterative and Antler. One of the big differences that I found between the two is iterative. Though it's focused on the early stage founders, it still needed you to have a team and an idea, right? So to be eligible to apply to iterative, you obviously need to, have an idea that you're working upon, and you need to have a sort of co-founder at least, right?
Hmm.
So, whereas in Antler, you could come in as a solo founder. So essentially, you could come in without an idea, without a co-founder, and literally, find a co-founder like I did, and work on an idea like I did, and then validate it, and then raise the pre-seed. So I think these are two significant differences between some of the existing accelerators which are there and Antler. So Antler is really 0 to 1 in the sense of backing founders and not ideas. So I think that's a big difference that I would point out between existing accelerators and the Antler, as an accelerator.
Okay, that's actually a really good point. I know that the other people I spoke to also mentioned the fact that they came in as solo founders, but I didn't realize that's really like the specificity of that program is they bring in talented individuals, individuals they want to bet on, but they don't have to have an idea or a team. And it's really there's a matchmaking element to it, and I guess you're
That's right.
really incubating several ideas before you double down and go with one that they might invest in as well. Is that's the
That's
idea?
correct. That's correct.
And
They do have a few teams which come in as preformed teams, but that's a
okay.
very small number. So the large portion of a cohort would be solo founders and individual founders who come in, and then that's the matchmaking element as well, right? Which you spoke about.
Cool. So, can you walk me through how they matchmake and how they're so successful at it? Because, again, like few people I spoke to had a success in finding a co-founder, whether they were, technical or business, and they were able to be matched with their counterparts. And I know that that's one of the biggest struggles when you're building a company, a startup, and you don't necessarily already know your co-founder. So, tell me about how they were successful at it and how it worked for you.
Sure. Yeah. So I think Antler has a 10-week program. So essentially, the program has been designed in a way to the initial part of the program. I would say the first 5 or 6 weeks are more focused towards getting people to know each other and work with each other. So these are typically ranging from having lunch roulettes to so that people can go together and grab lunch together, right? Or for example, boot camps. So there would be a lot of boot camps which would happen in the first few weeks, and in each boot camp you're sitting with a different set of people for the first few weeks, which are basically people, um, or teams selected by the Antler team, right? So essentially, they give you an opportunity to work closely with different people in the cohort. So you, one, know whom you don't want to work with, for sure, and then two, you can find someone that you match wavelengths with, and you feel that you can work together, and then probably build something together. So that's the first part of the 10-week program, right? And the second part is then once you've identified the person that you feel that you can work with, obviously, you look at complementary skills, and you look at,
Hmm.
things that you are looking at, right? And like I said, it may be without an idea. And both the co-founders or two or three co-founders might come together and think up of an idea and start developing the idea, right? So the first 5 weeks are more about finding that co-founder. The rest of the 5 weeks are about then working with the co-founder and on validating a few ideas before you double down on the idea that you've sort of seen that there is a gap in the market, or there is.
Okay. Very cool. And I noticed, you're building something for HR teams. You
Mhm.
yourself has had a very prominent career in companies that were catering to those audiences. So,
That's right.
you were a regional head and country manager at Monster, a regional director at talent.com.
That's right.
So, what you're offering now is catering to an audience that you know very well, I imagine. Was that
Sure.
intentional? Did you see a gap in the market before even going to Antler, and you really wanted to pursue that based on your job or your career? Like, can you walk us through that process?
Sure, that's a great question, Tim. I mean, and this goes back to a few months ago when I was still in the cohort at Antler, and one of the things that we realized is Antler would definitely want the founders to have a founder market fit in terms of understanding, nuanced understanding of the market that you are in, right? And not really a very superficial information of a market that you want to build something in. And obviously you're looking for that intersection. When I'm talking about the two co-founders, we're looking for that intersection between passion, interest, and skills. uh, And domain becomes important then, because then you need to know about a particular market to go deep enough to know what you need to build, or even know what the problems could be. And
Hmm.
also gives you a quick head start, when people, like in my case, I know people in the industry. I've been working with them for the last decade or so in the region. So it gives me an unfair advantage when I start, in order to access that network of people that I'm already in touch with, and can help me quickly. So the time to market is literally shorter, right?
Yep.
In that case.
Very cool. And can you talk a little bit about, where you're at right now with the business? I know you raised a pre-seed from Antler.
Right.
How is the business going? Can you throw a few numbers at me just to get a sense of your status right now?
Sure. I think so. We're pretty early stage. We've started building the products. We're still in the build phase. We're working with a couple of POC customers at the moment. Proof
Hmm.
of concept customers, and building it with them. The idea being, we want to ensure that we are closely working with users in the build phase, so we can kind of make those iterations. Needed as and when the product is getting built, right? And I think that could be
Yep.
a good idea for us to do, and that's where we are at the moment. We are expecting to have our MVP launched somewhere around end of April, May first week. So in a month and a half from now, we should be ready with our first version of the product.
Okay. And so I watched a webinar that you sent me over from LinkedIn,
Right. Yeah.
and I got curious because I'm a growth hacker. That's what I've been doing for the past three companies that I built and sold. And one of the strategies I used a lot was webinars and podcasts to get ICPs to talk to me without
Right.
having their guards up and thinking they're getting sold something. So when I watched that, now that you're saying you're still pre MVP, etc., are you using those types of strategies to gather intel from your ICP, or are you already pre-selling using webinars and podcasts?
Yeah, that's a nice question, Tim. I think we kind of doing a blend of these two things. One is obviously I need to have that dialogue with the ICP to understand, especially looking at generative AI, and it's relatively new technology, right? I mean, so we want to definitely see what is the market readiness for companies to invest in Gen AI led tools, and two, obviously, I also want to sort of build a companies and people who would be influenced.
And is this a strategy you were using either at talent.com or Monster or both? And again, this is out of pure curiosity personally.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, at talent.com, we did a few webinars as well, but we were also using other channels for lead generation, content being one of the other,
Okay.
major channels. So, anything which is content led
Hmm.
marketing, top of the funnel, lead gen, whether it's white papers or whether it's some reports. So, and I think that's similar thing that we did way back at Monster as well. So I think, that is a common strategy that I have used, and it works well, especially
It
for
does, yeah.
this specific ICP that we are.
Yeah, so TendoPay. I don't know if you had heard of us before or whatnot, but we were also targeting that exact same ICP in the Philippines. Except you were more on the recruitment, we were more on the employee benefit side, and
Okay.
so we had to use similar tactics as well because the RICP, which is Filipino HR teams, is
Mhm.
notoriously sort of well, they're not exactly conservative, but they are more careful with whom they meet and what tools they're willing to, integrate into their workflows. And I'm
Mhm.
sure you're seeing these objections because I did listen to that webinar and I hear exactly the same type of objections that I would hear.
Right.
And I realized that the podcasting tool was extremely powerful because you're really able to get these ICPs on a 30-40 minute call with their guards down and able to boost their ego with a conversation that is unrelated to your topic specifically, but then convert them into believers and then get them onto a demo meeting down the road, which was almost impossible using typical outbound strategy. So
Yeah,
I really appreciate someone who understands this type of strategy because it's still fairly new in Southeast Asia.
correct.
But
Yeah,
speaking of, you're going after a very tough market, Southeast Asia. I think you're focusing on the Philippines because of your background and also the fact that they speak English, which I think is great. But how do you handle the fact that they're one of the slowest movers uh, in terms of business? Like they like the way things are. And I've also spoken to many BPO leaders about how they're seeing LLMs and how they're seeing Gen AI for, to either not replace their workforce, but to enhance their workforce and like future proof themselves. And they're always telling me that they don't believe necessarily that they need to invest yet. It's kind of a fad. What are your thoughts on this? You must have a lot.
yeah. I mean, this is a very interesting, discussion point, Tim. And I think I've had these conversations as well, where you know, it I came across people who think this is an hype, and this is something which is something that will die off at some point, and but there are also, interestingly, a lot of people who think there's something without knowing the depth of what an LLM or Gen AI can do. But there are a lot of people there who believe that there's something which could be significant and can come out of this new technology, right? So I think there are people on both sides of the opinion there. Interestingly, going back to the point that you spoke about in terms of the Philippines market specifically, and the acceptance for new things, I'm completely aware of this, and I kind of know that they're not so forthcoming to experiment with new tools and technologies, and they would rather follow than lead when it comes to embracing
Mm-hmm.
essentially new technologies. And I think that's a challenge that I kind of factoring in when I am looking at the whole plan in terms of the go to market, right? So it's kind of factored in. What is very interesting and what kind of gets me to Philippines as a market is one of the larger volume, manpower volume markets around, right? So, for example,
Of course, yeah.
if you set this in context, if you talk about companies which have more than 10,000 employees in Singapore, you probably cannot find more than five companies, literally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you just look at the same number in Philippines, you probably find a few hundreds of them with more than 10,000 employees, and
Oh yeah, for sure.
even more than that, right? So I think if you're building something which is essentially linked at some point with the number of employees, or if it's linked with that sort of a metric, then I think it's a market that you don't want to miss out on, right? So and this is similar with say Indonesia as well, but language being a challenge, but also fairly the same with Malaysia, for example, right? I mean, these
Mm-hmm.
are markets which have larger headcounts and larger manpower,
Yep.
alignments in companies. So that makes it attractive. Obviously, I definitely want to leverage the fact that I've been in these markets, and I have personal, network that I can quickly. And as an early stage startup, you want to scale fast. You also need to, the best way is to obviously, at least for the initial set of customers, to go back to the network, so you can quickly, activate that network.
Yeah, I agree with you. And to be honest, like I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I've had really great experiences selling in the Philippines. The flip side of them being slow and more kind of hesitant is that once they sign in with you, they are there for the long haul. And you've built a good relationship, you have champions, and they will be diehard for your product. So that's the flip side, and that's the part I appreciate the most about that.
Right.
Cool. All right. Are you traveling a lot to the Philippines, or are you mostly doing everything remote? Do you have a team in place there?
Oh, not yet. So we haven't started hiring on the business side of things. At the moment, we're hiring people on the tech side because we're building the
Okay.
product. But we're hoping to get into the market once we have the MVP out. I think one of the things that I realized is in my interactions with ICPs is difficult for concepts, right? Especially when the concept relates to a fairly new technology, and the use cases of the technology, right? But it's more easier to understand something which is tangible, something which you can see, feel, experience. And I think that's one of the initial feedbacks I got, because when I was talking a lot about the use cases of Gen AI, for example, and how it can be used specifically in HR streams or work streams, I kind of realized that after a bit people can't connect the dots. And it's kind of important then to take something tangible to them, saying, hey, this is what it is, and this uses Gen AI or LLMs, but this is what it does, and try use it and see if this works for you, right? So then it's more tangible, and I think that's a better way to enter, as opposed to trying to pitch concepts. Especially for new technologies. I mean, something that they've been using for a long time, they already know it. They already, kind of have used some version of that technology in some shape or form. But for new technologies, I think, you need to kind of take it to a point where it can be, shown and demonstrated.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's still, people get information from their peers or from their, colleagues or whatnot. And right now, if you talk about LLMs, it's ChatGPT, and it's like, yeah, I typed this sentence and I got this text back, and it doesn't add so much value. They kind of see it as a gimmick, but even someone who's interested in AI, and someone who works in it, it's so hard to stay on top of all the new and great innovations in that space.
Right.
Like ChatGPT itself is scratching the surface. There's so much that can be done, but it can only be explained visually and with use cases. So I completely understand where you're coming from.
That's right. Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right, cool.
ChatGPT, a lot of people just think of it as, a tool which can, write an email, or it can do a lot more, right? So,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So
Well, first of all, I don't think anyone, like virtually anyone, uses a knowledge bases, which already enrich ChatGPT quite substantially and quite.
that's right.
So that's like a first step, and I think it applies to your specific product, right? Like
Yeah,
feeding a knowledge base of whatever the corporation does and has all of their documentation, and
that's right.
querying ChatGPT just with that already would probably provide quite a ton of value. And
That's
then
right.
being able to build personas around it, so that at the end of the day, I'm 99% sure that most people wouldn't know the difference between talking to a virtual agent or a real live person on the chat.
Yeah.
That's just something you have to demonstrate. They can't necessarily grasp the idea that that's possible at this point.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and you're right. And especially deep contextual chats, which can be powered by the LLMs. People have to experience it to understand what that means, especially if the
Hmm.
LLMs have been trained on specific data sets and specific knowledge base, and then their ability to absorb that knowledge, and then interact with a user is amazing, right? So
Yes.
I think that's something that that's a huge use case for any sort of product which can leverage that ability.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I kind of want to talk about other stuff than AI, because we could keep talking for hours, I'm sure. I think, but
Yeah,
some people who are not really interested might get bored. So, I want to ask you about living in Southeast Asia overall. So,
yeah,
this podcast is helping people who are already local, but also foreigners who might want to establish in Southeast Asia to build a business. You've lived in a few places in Southeast Asia already. Can you talk to me about that experiences? Where was your favorite? Why, etc., etc.?
sure. Yeah, that's a very interesting topic, Dave. I moved to Philippines, Manila specifically, way back in 2015, somewhere in the end of 2015. And that was my first Southeast Asian stay experience, right? So it's I always feel that it's very different to live in a place versus traveling as a tourist, right? I mean, these are two different experiences, and one needs to really stay and live to know what the culture, the context of what it means to live, right? So I think one of my first experiences in Southeast Asia was Manila, and in some ways, Manila is very similar to India. Some large cities, especially when it comes to traffic and some of those problems. You
Mm,
also face similar problems in India. But it's also very different in terms of the whole cultural context, right? So, we were talking about Filipinos a while ago, and I think I've had very loving Filipino team members. For the longest time that I was working there, and even when I was in Singapore, I had a team back in Manila as well. Culturally, I think it was a great experience. Understanding, clients, understanding the way they think about, how do they want to interact and engage with you, and also, the overall experience of understanding the various I would say uh, perceptions that so for example, when in my team, Filipinos had a perception about how Indian bosses would be, for example, right? And it was very interesting to kind of understand that, and then they starting to realize that no, this guy is not like what we thought it is. And so
mm,
there were some very good moments talking about the country itself. I think I traveled a lot in the Philippines, so I had a great friend of expats back in Manila,
mm,
and we used to frequently travel. So we to many islands and done snorkeling and things that you would definitely do when you're in the Philippines.
mm,
So that experience also was quite fantastic. And then I moved to Singapore in about 2019, and just before COVID. So unfortunately, the moment I got in, first few months was very interesting because Singapore is very different from Manila. Everything is so organized here. There's no traffic. You have a train that takes you from point A to point B, and everything works, right? So nothing is
mm,
broken, and obviously you have a decent expat culture and community in Singapore as well. But then COVID happened, and then for 2 years you were straight locked into your condo, right? So
mm,
I think I didn't get to enjoy Singapore as much as I would have wanted to. And since then, I've been traveling a lot, post the COVID. So travels kept me out of Singapore more than in Singapore. So, I've been in and out. So, personally, I think, I've had better experience, as someone's living as a foreigner living abroad. I think I had better experience in the Philippines than I've had in Singapore. Nothing to do with Singapore in particular. It was more about not being able to spend as much time as I would have probably wanted to.
okay, fair enough. And you know, it seems like you had a really, really good career. Like you ended up being country manager, regional manager, etc. What prompted you? And every founder that I know, they have this chip on their shoulder or something that made them really need to be a founder at some point in their life. So, what was that for you, and why did you absolutely have to become a founder?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tim. So, so way back in 23, around the beginning of 23, the markets started to crash globally, and especially, it had a cascading effect, right? So you had, markets crashing, you had, everything that was built up during the COVID started to kind of see a decline, right? And all that led to a lot of companies losing clients and losing revenues, and that it was the same case with talent.com, where I was the regional director for Southeast Asia. And they kind of started consolidating their markets because they had spread out during COVID, because the
Mm,
demands were such. but then they started to consolidate and look at focusing on just a few markets, right? And I think I could see it coming from the early part, because we did see some of the large accounts that we have acquired in the region stopping to use, and revenues dropping, and talent.com was a scale up, not literally like a large company. So it obviously had to look at and cut losses, right? So I think at that point, I could see that coming, and eventually, they decided to move out of some of the markets in APAC, for example, or some of the other emerging markets that they were focusing on. So back in May of 2023, I was at that point where I kind of wanted to sit back and take a few months away and really think about. And I mean, this does not happen often in your career, right? It happens, I mean, I just experienced it once in my career, right? So I wanted to sit back and literally think about what are the things that I would like to prioritize, and what are the things that I would like to focus on. What is it that I have gained over the last so many years before I could start giving interviews and looking for other jobs, right? So one of the things that I kind of realized, and I kind of introspected, and I thought that I've been doing a lot of things, and I've gained a lot of knowledge on certain domains, and kind of useful experience, right? And I could put this to use for building something as well, right? Or of course, I could always go back and work, but can I also consider an option where I am building, basically, innovating in this space? And is there a way to do that? And I kind of thought over it, and I kind of liked the thought itself, right? So I started looking at options and what I could do if I want to do that, right? And one of the things that obviously comes to your mind is to quickly, start something scrappy, or you look at something, which is more the thing that I did, right, which is going through a proper chapter, and then I kind of realized that while I might have spent so many years working, being a startup entrepreneur or a startup founder is a different ball game, right? And you also need to understand that part of the journey, and you probably it would be helpful to have a mentor, or an incubator or an accelerator to support you in that journey, right? And I kind of thought through it, and then I realized maybe it's worth looking at going through an accelerator. So it's more structured, and you enter this in a more structured way, as opposed to jumping into the water and then trying to swim your way, right? So that's what I did, and that's when I started looking at what are the options, and then some of the accelerators in Southeast Asia popped up, and then I kind of applied to a few of them, and then went through their selection process, and then eventually I landed up in Antler, and that's been my journey, in terms of how I got to this point.
Very cool. Very good and interesting journey. And I have a few follow up questions. So, you're still fresh out of a corporate job, like a very senior corporate job, which is almost like founder level, right? You're a
Yeah.
country manager. Usually, you're opening new markets. Have you noticed a big difference in your time allocation and mindsets and sort of the day to day of your work from that corporate job to being a founder? Can you walk us through that a little?
Sure. Yeah. So I think so one of the things that I've kind of and one of the commonalities between a corporate job, in the especially the one that I was doing, and being a founder, is you're always doing a lot of things, and you're quite busy through your day, but what changes is the composition of the work you do, right? So for example, when I was at Talent, and I was one of the first few employees in Southeast Asia, and I started building the whole market and the team in the region, right? So it was very much like being an entrepreneur, in a way that but you had a support. So you had a marketing team that you could go to, saying, hey, can you help me with a white paper, or can you help me with a report? You had a tech team who could say, okay, can you help me with these five things I would need? I need certain localization on the website here. Can you help me with localization? So these were things that you could literally reach out to people within the company and say, I need these things to be done. And could you tell me by when can you do it, right? And things would get done because, you are, but, being an entrepreneur, there's no one to go and say that to, right? It's you who's supposed to go and then build it. So if I need a white paper, it's me who's
Mm,
supposed to sit and figure out what the white paper should be all about, and where do I get the content from, and how do I do the research, and how do I structure it, right? So I think that is the big difference between being in a more organized corporate role, and when you're an entrepreneur. So you're literally doing a bit of everything, right? So at times I am, when I'm interviewing people, and we decide to hire people, so I'm actually doing what a HR manager would be doing. So I'm literally typing out an offer, and I am ensuring that I have a file in which I have the employee's data kept for me to access at any point in the future. So it's literally sometimes in HR. Sometimes I'm talking to investors, and I am wearing the hat of a CEO and a founder, and I'm pitching for investment. Other times I am spending time talking to clients, essentially doing user interviews and research. So you're doing a lot of things, but it's a diverse set of tasks. So it's not just confined to your specific area, but it's like literally doing a bit of everything to make things work. And I think that's a huge difference between being in a job in a corporate versus doing your own thing. I think this is one significant learning that I have gained over the last few months.
that's awesome. Yeah, you're kind of a chief everything officer at this point. You got to get your hands dirty. At what point, and I know you're still early in the founder journey, but are you starting to think about delegating certain tasks, and how do you figure when and how and who to you're going to start delegating? Because if you're going to grow as a founder as well, you're going to have that moment where enough is enough. You can't spread yourself that thin. You're going to start needing to talk to experts or start hiring, etc. Have you started thinking about that process?
Yes, so one of the things that we've been, me and my co-founder Chris, we've been working on is essentially, having a plan in terms of identifying what are the key roles which we would like in the first leg of when we start scaling, right? So and these are roles that we kind of realize are essential and would also bring in certain expertise which let's say both of us may lack. I mean, at this point, like you said, it's doing everything, but you can't be good at everything, right? You can
Yeah,
only be good at a few things, and you need to get in 10x people in your team who are good at those things that you need to do. And I think that's what we've been focusing on in terms of identifying what are those roles that we need to first go and fill. And obviously, I will still have to continue to do a few other things, but as time goes by, ideally you're at a point where you can then focus on some of the key tasks which I know I am best at, right? And I know that probably I can do those tasks, in terms of the way it can be done. Probably no one else in the team can do at this point, right? So at least I can then focus on those tasks and not literally spread myself out too thin, right? So
fair enough. Fair enough. And kind of in that same line of questioning, I don't know if you had that as a corporate executive, but as a founder, we're always looking for ways to optimize our life, finding life hacks that will help us, perform better, etc., in our work and outside. I know that for myself, one life hack that I discovered that should be obvious, but as a French person, I like drinking wine, and I was drinking, and I stopped drinking, and all of a sudden, my performance overall, my mental clarity, my motivation, and my productivity all shot up. And so I started drinking. Is there anything in your life that you've, life hacked basically to improve yourself, whether it's in work or life in general?
Sure, I think yeah, and that's a great point, Tim. I mean, I always think that there's that one thing that you need to kind of do to kind of like you spoke about, and I did that for about a couple of years as well. I literally stopped drinking for about two years and a few months, and it really changed my life. I mean, there
Mm-hmm.
was a point where I couldn't imagine a weekend without drinking with my friends, and then suddenly you are not having a drop of alcohol, and it's quite challenging, and you kind of find yourself out of place when you're with the same set of friends because you're no longer drinking, and you can't literally sometimes connect with what's being said and
Mm-hmm.
what's happening, right? But so I've been through that, and that was very helpful. Obviously, post that phase, I literally now I rarely drink, but it's something that I don't need. So it's something that I literally cut off from my life, right? So I realized that I can live without it. So that was very useful for me as well. But the other thing which I do more very often, I actually do it every day, is I have this 1 hour morning routine, which involves a run and exercise. So it's essentially 1 hour in the morning, which is purely kept aside for my run and my morning exercise, and I make it a point to do that every day. I've seen a big difference from the time I have started doing this, in terms of my mental clarity, in terms of my productivity, in terms of how I start my day, and I think that's a life hack that I kind of have stuck onto because it's something that has benefited me a lot. And as a founder now, more so because it gives me that me time where I'm with my thoughts, and I am doing things which make me feel good about myself and my body and the way and my fitness as well. But at the same time, it gives me that mental bandwidth to think about the overall so the ideas are flowing more freely at that point because you're literally disconnected from any other thing. So you're not looking at your phone, or for example, you're not staring into your laptop or doing any work. You're literally all by yourself, right? So yeah.
That's really cool. And it's funny because our life hacks seem so obvious, right? Don't kill yourself with alcohol, be healthy and exercise, but
Yeah.
it's tough to do that. So yeah, I appreciate that. During your runs though, are you optimizing your time? I know that when I'm running, I get a bit bored, so I listen to podcasts and I'm like an avid podcast listener. Is that something you do as well, or how do you fill up your time just with your
So I
self and your thoughts?
yeah, great. So I generally listen to music, but it's mostly I'm not while I'm listening to it, I'm not thinking about it. So
Hmm.
it's something that's happening in the background, and that's one of the reasons I tried listening to podcasts, and then what I realized is it starts to interfere with my thinking because then when you're listening to a podcast, you tend to then start listening and analyzing what's being said, right? And whereas music, essentially can just go on by the side, and you could still be doing your thinking. So. It's music for me which works if
Hmm.
I want to have that that mental talking happening, and it could be any music. So literally I listen to a diverse range of music from jazz to hip hop to rock, and but I realize it's more of something that keeps playing in the background while I'm doing my thinking.
I think that's good. Yeah, it's tough when I listen to podcasts. I'm always stopping and writing notes and stuff so I can understand the distraction. So, do you still listen to podcasts though, to stay on top of either
Oh
business
yes,
or
I
AI
do.
or something
I
like
do.
that? What
Yes.
What do you
Yeah.
listen to these days?
So I'm listening to YC a lot these days. So YC has some very useful podcasts, especially for early stage founders.
Hmm.
I'm also listening to a few podcasts around AI, and also a few podcasts around HR recruitment. So I kind of look up for these podcasts on Spotify just to understand and resonate more with my ICP, right? To understand what are the new trends and what are the new challenges, and also the new opportunities that I could look to build for them, right? So
Yeah, no, for sure. And earlier you mentioned, you joined Antler. You mentioned mentors in passing. Have you ever used a mentor throughout your career? I'm curious because I haven't used one, but I've heard great things, and I'm just curious how you meet them, how you use them, what kind of advice you might be getting from them that's applicable to your business because they're not necessarily with you there all the time. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I've been so we have a mentor from Antler, right? And Our mentor is being a great support in terms of the overall journey from the time we started working on the idea until this day. But prior to that, in my previous work life, I haven't, and I've similar to you. I've heard of stories about how mentors can benefit. And can help you in a lot of areas. Unfortunately, I haven't experienced it. Whatever mentoring that I experienced was more from people that I would know from from my own personal network. And it but it wouldn't be the sort of mentoring that I've heard about, right? So I've someone who can help you with certain areas. So I've never experienced that sort of mentoring. I'm only experiencing it now, and this is very focused on the entrepreneurship, right? It's very focused on the startup and how do you go about and at least ensuring that you don't make mistakes which most founders do, and you
Hmm.
kind of stay away from those mistakes, right? And I mean, you still need to do what you need to do, but at least the mentor tells you that, hey, this is a red flag, just don't do this because, many founders have gone that path and failed. So you should try and avoid that, right? So, but, uh, but I definitely see the value today of, having a mentor, having a subject matter expert on your side, and I definitely feel that it's something that can be very useful for anybody in their career to have a mentor on their side, even if it means catch up once a month to kind of dedicate an hour or two to discuss about certain topics and get mentors view. I think it would be it's a great life hack, to be honest with you. And everybody should try and get themselves one such mentor. I definitely see the value in that today.
Awesome. Yeah, it's so funny because I dream of finding a mentor. I just don't know where to look. And I'm in a weird place where I've accomplished a few things. I've built and sold a few businesses, so people come to me for mentorship. But in my mind, I'm like nowhere near where I want to be. And I feel like there are people who are, way more advanced in their life and have sold way bigger businesses that I really admire. But I have this complex where I think like, why on earth would they bother working with me or mentoring me? They don't like unless they're doing it out of charity. Like they don't need to do that. So it's kind of a weird spot. So that's why I'm curious about the topic, and I'm always interested to hear other people's perspectives. So you're in AI, you're in HR, and I'm really curious about AI, as you've noticed. What are some trends in Southeast Asia around AI? I know Singapore is investing heavily, and we've got one of the fastest growing talent pool of AI developers in the world.
Mhm.
What are some interesting trends you're seeing in AI that your layman's average person doesn't know about that might be interesting to hear and from someone who's an expert?
I think so. In terms of the trends that I'm clearly seeing, so obviously AI has been around for the traditional AI has been around for quite some time, right? So it's nothing new, and it's been there for at least about 8-10 years, and you've been hearing about AI, yeah, or applications of AI in many softwares and many tools. What definitely has changed is the whole large language models and their use cases and applications, and that's something which literally came about just a couple of years ago. And I think if I'm looking at the overall trends with respect to the skills required to do some of these tasks, I think there are new skills which have emerged. For example, prompt engineering, right? So you wouldn't find a prompt engineer 3 years ago if you were looking for one. but you find that now, and that's a great skill for anybody who's looking to acquire something in AI and wants to probably make a great career out of AI, because like what you and I were discussing earlier, Tim, there's a lot of juice in LLMs, but you need to know how to get LLMs to do certain things, and the only way to get them to do that is to prompt them well, right? And I think prompt engineering is one such career opportunity and skill set that literally came about in the last couple of years, and it's something that I believe has a great potential. Now, talk about how do you mix LLMs and traditional, say, predictive models and AI models. I think that's a great area as well. So anyone who understands or has been in AI for a long time can also learn prompt engineering to see how you can get them working together. And I think that's a great skill set and a great area to kind of learn and grow. And these are some of the things that I'm seeing. They've been machine learning engineers for last 3-4 years or whatnot, and now they really want to focus on prompt engineering and see how they can blend these two things together. And I think so. This is one big change that I'm seeing when it comes to skills and when it comes to new trends around AIs and especially around LLMs for that matter.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah. Um, a little bit more, let's say, controversial. Elon Musk recently talked about how AGI is around the corner. So basically, in his mind, next year it's happening. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So it's very interesting, right? So just a while ago, so just pitching a very earlier, like it's not yet completely there, but I just wanted to get a feel. This is someone from HR, and I wanted the person to kind of give me, more, I would say, a feedback, a candid feedback on what they think, and when I took the person through some of these things, the question that I was asked is, hey, this is very interesting, but don't you think this will take away the jobs of few people? It was a question which came out of nowhere, right? So and I wasn't prepared for that one. So I thought over it and I said, look, the way I look at this is this augments, the capabilities of a specific person, and takes away the manual and repetitive tasks that actually don't add value but fill up time. Okay, now if you look at that concept of filling up time and getting paid for the time you put versus the output that is coming out of your time, I think there is a big challenge in that specific way of doing and looking at things, right? So I'll give you an example, right? So when I was in Manila, so I kind of had a culture where people kind of kept. I knew that there are challenges with commuting, especially rush hour commuting. So I would ensure that my team has that flexibility to start late if they want to, so they avoid the rush hour commuting and they can peacefully get to the office at. I mean, those were the days when you didn't have work from home or literally hybrid or whatever, right? So and they kind of like that, and they used to work late as well on certain times, not because I was asking them to work late, but because they felt they had to complete their tasks before they head home, and probably they also wanted to avoid the rush hour while going back home as well, right? But when I moved to Singapore, I saw that people come in at 9, exactly at 9, and they start their work at 9, and at 6 o'clock the office is empty, right? And I used to wonder, how is it possible that at 6 everybody has no work left to do? How is
Mm,
that just possible, right? So then I realized that the culture is of filling up those hours, and it's like calculating 9 to 6, right? And you exactly do those hours and you're gone. That's your
hmm
commitment, and you put in your hours, and that particular concept is now going to change, because you may need, I mean, the hours that you put in, does not necessarily translate into productivity and output. And with AI led tools, there are a lot of things that used to be time consuming, and which used to be attributed
Hmm.
as a part of your job. AI tools can do it for you, and then you need to literally think about what are you going to do with your 8 hours if 8 hours is your thing. Because AI tools can literally do 4 hours of your work in a few minutes, right? So
Hmm.
what are you going to do? And I think that's a huge challenge that I see coming up in workplaces, with respect to how people look at productivity, and how people look at efforts and time, being one of the factors.
Yeah, that measuring people's productivity, having the proper KPIs, the ascent of AI agents, there's so much going on. It's going to be a very interesting
Yeah.
decade, to say the least. One of the last questions I have for you, well, the last is basically a question from the previous guest that I had. And I have this sequence where I ask you to ask a question to the next guest without knowing who they are. And then I'll ask you
Okay.
the question that the previous guest. So go ahead and ask your question. And it can be anything.
Okay. This is interesting. Okay, I would want to, and this is a question that I would want to ask. If you were to raise a child in today's generation, and in today's era, uh, what are the things that you would prioritize to teach, and make your child learn, right? So what are the things that you would want your child to learn, which you feel would be necessary for the next generation, or at least the next 40, 50 years? So yeah, I think that's a question I would definitely want to ask.
Great question. And so the last person I had here asked you, how will you measure the success of your life?
I think I try to simplify how I would measure success of my life by looking at so I can easily say by looking at how happy I am in my life, but I can break it down a little bit further by looking at, uh, am I doing things which are meaningful in my day-to-day life? Am I learning things? Fulfilling my time towards my relationships with people that matter to me? Am I getting enough time to spend with the people whom I love, and who matter to me? And am I being fair in the way I conduct myself in my day to day, life? And I think these are, five things that I feel are could tell me if I am successful or not, and if I am doing good at these five areas, I think I am successful, and I would define myself being successful there.
At least where you're very good at improvising. Okay, and like to finish off, is there something you'd like to shout out to for our audience?
Oh, sure. I think I personally find technology, specifically AI, very exciting, and I would encourage people to know more about this. I mean, there's a lot of disinformation that's happening. There are a lot of people who probably don't know a lot of this is an evil. To spare some time to read about it and understand, I'm looking forward to connecting with anybody know anything about LLMs, generative AI, or AI, and specifically in context with HR. I'm happy to have that conversation.
Cool. And how do people reach out to you if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, I'm there on LinkedIn, so you can definitely find me on LinkedIn, Nilesh Ghai, or you could drop me a note at nileshghai at gmail.com, nileshghai at gmail.com. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Nilesh, that's the pod. Thank you so much for being on. It was a
Thanks.
real
Thanks, Tim.
pleasure. We learned a
Same
lot,
here.
and I really appreciate having you here.
Same here. And I wish you the best with your podcast, Tim. Thank you for having me.